So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Elon Musk wading into British politics and just causing an absolute storm, and not in a positive way either. Like, this is absolutely horrendous. So it starts with a tweet from Lord Talbot, who says, "Meet Jess Phillips. She's the safeguarding minister. She has refused the inquiry into Muslim grooming gangs. Can someone tell her she's supposed to be safeguarding children, not the gang?" So for context here, there was already an inquiry into grooming gangs, which Labour have said they're going to do a full inquiry of, right? Implement fully, right? And now you've got Elon Musk tweeting Jess Phillips is an genocide apologist. So you can read what he's put on the screen there, which is simply untrue. And the idea that he's got the free speech to say this or whatever, like she could sue him, I think, in a British court over this. I'm not a lawyer, so a lot of the reform guys are trying to back it, saying no, that's the joys of free speech. Life would be boring if you agreed on everything. But again, these were the same people who were quiet when Carol Cadwalader was getting sued for defamation by a guy who, I think, donated significant amounts of money to people like Farage. So they were very quiet when it comes to free speech on that specific issue. And Tice arguing like you're more to good, or you're more. Let's have
you would accept that was completely wrong when he said that she was a rape genocide apologist.
The reality is we live in a world of free speech. Mr. Musk is entitled to say what he wants.
Sure, and you would agree that it's wrong.
We all might use different language. I will use my language. Mr. Musk will use his, and other people will use theirs.
But you'd agree it's factually wrong.
I want to know why Jess Phillips is rejecting a national inquiry.
But would you?
Because we've already had one, you absolute moron.
Agree that it's factually wrong, that she is not a rape genocide apologist?
I don't know what Jess Phillips is. I don't know why she's rejected this inquiry.
What is rape?
Well, you're a member of Parliament, pal, so Parliament's coming off recess, so you can probably ask or the Labour Party about this.
Genocide. What is a rape genocide apologist? What is it? You won't say that it's wrong. You won't say that Jess Phillips is not a rape genocide apologist.
What I will say is, why is Jess Phillips rejecting a national inquiry? It's as simple as that.
You could say that, but you could still say that she's not a rape genocide apologist, that Mr. Musk is wrong. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive, Mr. Tice.
No, they aren't. But I'm telling you what I want to say, which is that she should allow a national inquiry. That is the key point.
You don't think that's rather extremist language, rather toxic language?
But you seem rather offended by language. We live in a world, the right to
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are some things that could be said that offend you.
The right to offend. I will use my language. Other people will use theirs.
So he could say whatever he liked.
And
again, if you say certain things about these people, I guarantee you're going to hear from lawyers if it gets traction. It's ridiculous. And, not just reform, the Tories are involved in this as well.
I'm sure many of the listeners would agree with that, Shadow Home Secretary, but surely you would condemn outright the comments of someone saying that one of the ministers of the British government is a rape genocide apologist.
Yeah, look, he shouldn't have said that, and it was wrong, and I absolutely don't endorse that language.
Why wouldn't you just condemn it?
Well, I'm not going to get into like a sort of bidding war for inflammatory language myself. He shouldn't have used it, it was wrong. But he was reasonable and right to raise the issue in general, because we can't any longer allow these sort of issues to be taboo or ignored, because we owe, as a society, a duty of care to these vulnerable young girls.
Do you think well, if you genuinely believe that, how come when you were in government you barely did anything about it?
He was
who
right.
were systematically raped.
Do you think he was
over
right?
Many years.
Do you think he was right to say that Keir Starmer was
the guy who was in charge of the Tory party when some of this stuff was going on? I think I've got the clip here. Was arguing that it's like chasing these, these allegations, like spaffing up a wall, money up a wall. That's what he said. So spare me with this.
Complicit in the mass rape of Britain.
Again, I wouldn't use that language, but we don't actually know, do we, exactly what cases crossed Keir Starmer's desk as Director of Public Prosecutions.
What we do know is he changed the rules around prosecution so that they could actually pursue more cases, and that there were massive changes under Starmer at the time, which meant that these grooming gangs could be prosecuted.
What cases were proceeded with, what cases were thrown in the bin, and that is why was one of the reasons why we need a proper national statutory public inquiry to get to the bottom, to get to the truth behind those kind of things, and not just the CPS, the police and local councils as well. We heard Simon Danchuk, the former Labour MP for Rochdale, just a couple of days ago, saying that when he was an MP, he was instructed by the then chair of the Labour Party to not talk about these issues, to cover them up, because the Labour Party were worried about losing Muslim votes.
Now, if that's true, that person 100%, that should have been found in an inquiry, and if it wasn't, then there's real questions to answer if this stuff is true and that actually happened.
It's completely wrong, and that is the kind of thing that the inquiry, public inquiry, needs to get to the bottom of.
Well, why didn't you have one then in the 14 years you were in office?
Well, of course, we did have some. We had the original J inquiry. Then we had the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse that reported a couple of years ago, and that was a national inquiry. But I think the scope now needs to be.
Why don't you do that then? If you knew about this stuff, right? You talked about this Labour MP. Maybe you guys didn't know at the time or whatever. But if that's the case, then surely you should have done more and actually implemented the recommendations, as Goodall points out.
To look into more examples of this terrible abuse than that inquiry did. The Grooming Gangs Task Force was also set up by Rishi Sunak a couple of years ago, and that actually, in the year before the election, successfully led to 550 arrests of gang rape paedophiles. But and because of the work of that gangs task force and more recent information like the revelations that Simon Danchuk made that I referred to just recently, we do now need a national public inquiry.
I mean, they had their chance to do one, and there was an inquiry. If that inquiry scope was too limited, that's on you guys, and you need to make the argument about where the limitations were and why we need another one, because you've wasted millions of pounds then if you've done a botched inquiry. Like, this argument from the Tories makes no sense. They've asked Wes Streeting about this. Who cares? Wes Streeting. This is Nigel Farage talking about how great a guy Elon Musk is.
Massively. He's such a hero figure to the younger generation. I mean, hey, he's going to send them to Mars,
Lol. And then,
friend, Elon Musk, now your friend, and is he going to give you millions of pounds?
Well, that's a real question, isn't it? Now, forget about the $100 million being talked about in the newspapers.
Are you going to give you money?
That is for the birds.
Is he going to give you money?
He may well do. But it's got to be legal. He's got to be comfortable with it. He may well give us money. Whether he does or not, I'll tell you what he gives us. With huge numbers of young people, he makes us look cool.
Wah, 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 wah. The Reform Party needs a new leader. Farage doesn't have what it takes. And this is all over Tommy Robinson, because Farage wants to create a separation between himself, the Reform Party, and Tommy Robinson and his goons. And so this is what's happened here. Elon Musk calling Tommy Robinson a hero over the grooming gang stuff, despite the fact that there are members of the EDL who are PDF files, should we say. That's the internet term for it. Farage saying, well, this is a surprise. Elon is a remarkable individual, but on this, I'm afraid I disagree. My view remains Tommy Robinson is not right for reform. I never sell out my principles. I mean, I think you do, buddy. But, crazy business. He's just saying to him, nah, we don't care. Let's see, Wes Streeting being asked about this and Goodall. This one's actually good, one worth listening to.
Well, this is a free country. America's a free country. He's free to say what he would like. But all I would say to anyone in position of power and influence, whether they're politicians or indeed in the media or social media, with power comes responsibility.
And that's why you should stop attacking trans people and all the other dumb policies you're doing, Bao. Because with power comes responsibility. You're a health minister. You have responsibility.
And we have seen in our own country where lies, smears, misinformation can lead to, and where a whipping up of hatred and extremism can lead to, including attacks on politicians.
Do you think what Musk has said makes that more likely, potentially?
Well, I certainly think that the smears directed at Jess Phillips makes her less safe.
It's true, someone got arrested for sending her malicious communications. We don't know what specifically was said, but it's not great overall. So, and it doesn't matter if you give them facts. This guy here, Millwall, pausing, how complicit were you in covering up the Muslim gangs? And then Andy Burnham saying, I ordered the single biggest inquiry of recent times, which is ongoing and has led to arrests, charges and convictions, but I can see why you won't be letting facts get in the way of your propaganda. And this guy reply saying, you've been rumbled, son, face it like an adult instead of whining like a child. I mean, I don't know if that's aimed at Burnham or that Millwall guy, but whatever. You got the Conservative Party, this geezer here, God knows who he is, talking about, quoting Kemi Badenoch, saying it was a scandal made possible by the collusion and cover-ups of officials, the police and politicians who are more concerned about community relations than about victims and their families. The fact that perpetrators of this violence appear to have deliberately picked victims because they were white and not from their own community or religious background must not be ignored. I don't think that's actually true, Kevin. I genuinely, I'd need to see some evidence for that. She says previous inquiries have failed to examine this. It's for society and the state to address the issue, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. So as women's, equalities minister, surely you should have dealt with this. Here she is calling for a national inquiry, right? But then there was one, like we said before. An investigation you had investigations by different councils. Trials have taken place all across the country in recent years, but no authority has joined the dots. 2025 must be the year that victims start to get justice. But again, why wasn't that especially under your tenure as a women's and equalities minister? Maybe you didn't care about that kind of stuff at all. So the report found there was no evidence of widespread child abuse in this. So in Oldham, an inquiry was set up after rumours spread online that children were being groomed in council homes, shisha bars, and by taxi drivers. The report found there was no widespread evidence of child abuse in those settings or of a cover-up by the council, but the review did point out other serious failings among safeguarding services in the area. The independent inquiry into child abuse, which published its final report in 2022, so this is the last big one, knitted several of these inquiries together alongside its own investigation. Professor Alexis J., who led the inquiry, and said in November she felt frustrated that none of her 20 recommendations to tackle abuse had been implemented more than 2 years later. Now, riddle me this, gang. In 2022, who were the elected party? Who were in charge of this country? She said it's a difficult subject matter, but it's essential that there are some public understanding. But we can only do what we can to press the government to look at the delivery of this. It doesn't need more consultation. It does not need more research or discussion. It just needs to be done. So this is the expert in this field who's talking about we don't need any more inquiries. Just get the recommendations done that she recommended at the time. So the Tories kept, the Tories could have done something about this. She specifically could have done something about this, and I hope when she tries to bring this up at PMQs, which she inevitably will do, I hope they fire back at her with this. Pathetic. You've got even this clown, this Truss, chipping in as well, saying, Jess Phillips, the same Home Office minister who excused masked Islamist thugs. What is she talking about? Because her title, Parliamentary Undersecretary of State for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, is a perversion of the English language. Like, this is the worst Prime Minister with the worst takes here. You literally had the person who led the inquiry saying we don't need any more inquiries. We just need to actually act on what was recommended. And this is, as Francis Coppola points out, there's a whole thread about this. It just doesn't make sense. And it is worth discussing, the situation, what actually happened, and we'll do that towards the end of the video as well, because there's more clips I want to discuss. Child 44, because they can't actually name them because they're minors, impregnated at 13 in Rochdale. Let's be honest, that's not the right word. It raped her at 13. Police took her aborted fetus without telling her to DNA test it, and then forgot about it in a freezer. She bumped into her rapist at Asda because he had been released without her being told. Like, this is a system that does not care about certain victims. I don't think that's just white working class girls either. I think that's generally ones that are poorer in general. I think it's just a system that just does not care about people. I don't understand how this could happen. You've got more kind of the splits. This video is kind of all over the place, but Reem Ibrahim, person who works for the IEA, notorious goon, saying this is all getting a bit nuts. Farage isn't right to lead reform, the party he started, because he refused to accept Tommy Robinson, a man who was in prison for assaulting an off-duty police officer, mortgage fraud, stalking. There really is a long history of Tommy Robinson which his crew don't really know about. She says, if Reform UK wants to be successful, it cannot associate with former EDL members. It cannot associate with people who genuinely just hate Muslims because they are Muslims. Farage's decision to distance himself from Robinson may alienate a select few people on the right, but will open up the opportunity for much more wide-reaching support, which is clear. He's doing it for political reasons. But I don't think she's 100% wrong. The problem is there are a lot of Reform voters who are big Tommy Robinson fans who will not vote for this party because of this. And this is the clip I was talking about here. We're going to play the audio for this.
Is, I think, an awful lot of money, an awful lot of police time now goes into these historic offences and all this malarkey. And, £60 million I saw was being spaffed up the wall on, some investigation into historic child abuse and all this kind of thing. What on earth is that going to do to protect the public now? What the people want is to see officers out on the streets doing what they signed up.
So let's not look at past offences. We need the police out there to maybe stop new offences happening. Is that what we're getting from this? £60 million. How far does that go for the police in general? Just the idea the Conservative Party care about these victims is genuinely just one of the biggest lies I've ever heard. They oversaw. They could have done more to deal with this stuff. They chose not to. We got these guys, the news agents, talking about if Tom Robinson is their dividing line, that Musk is making Farage look more centrist. It's like, no, you how do you not know that the political spectrum, like the right wing goes really far out? He's making him look more centrist, yeah, relative to Tommy Robinson, maybe relative to Musk, but not centrist in general. Like the news agents, oh my god, man. I guess Goodall's the only decent person on this podcast. Nicholas Watt here saying, for Cooper, common statement on child exploitation and abuse, there are 14 members of the government on the Treasury front bench. There are 6 members of the Conservative front bench on the opposition front bench. So clearly they care about this. Also, Nigel clearly cares about this. So does Ticey, because they're there, right, in Parliament, right? Oh, no, they're not. And, let's not forget the Tories used this stuff as a political weapon. You had, Suella Braverman being debunked. She talked about how it's Pakistani grooming gangs doing all this stuff, even though proportionately that's not actually true when you look at the actual the evidence at hand. So, yeah, it was clearly a political weapon for these people, and that's what they do. You got here Chris Phillips talking about this.
Just say, in that
Tory shadow Home Minister.
In that vein, a word on the Prime Minister's comments this morning. It is not far right to stand up for victims of mass rape.
It is to weaponise it in the way you guys have, though.
And smearing people.
Order.
It's those concerns.
Shadow. People want to hear.
No one wants to hear what that idiot's got to say. And you've got an actual thing, which is Stephen Kinnock confirming that the government will implement all the recommendations set out in the J report on child abuse, including a national financial redress scheme for those who have been let down by institutions in the past, which is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Like, this is one of the, like I said, I don't give the Labour Party credit on a lot of things, and there'll be something coming up where, they broke a manifesto promise on this. But this is good. This is very good. This policy here. You got Cooper talking about how they're going to make it mandatory to report abuse, making it an offence to fail to report or cover up child abuse. The protection of institutions must never be put before the protection of children, because all that happens is once it gets out, and it will get out at some point, what happens is that institution gets demolished, not just because of the crime that happened, but also the cover-up. The cover-up is normally worse. It normally makes things so much worse. This is the one I was frustrated about. So Labour breaks their pledge I'll word it better, sorry. Labour has ditched their promise to set up specialist tribunals to deal with cases of SA. The Observer says the pledge has been put on ice and has been replaced by a broad review of the courts. So, this is where maybe the Tories could take a dig at them. But again, like, they hollowed out legal aid and things like that. There's a reason why this promise can't be done. At least there is a political answer for Labour they can use. But I don't think, in the context of all of this going on, I don't think it will go down well. Government sources at the Ministry of Justice appeared to confirm this week the idea of using vacant rooms and buildings on court sites to fast-track our cases and reduce the number awaiting trial. So the government were going to do that, now they're not. Instead, they're going to do a review, which again kicks it into the long grass. In its manifesto, Labour said specifically it would fast-track cases through specialist courts at every Crown Court location in England and Wales, suggesting it was an urgent priority and a key element of its commitment to tackle violence against women and girls. but the legal profession says it was always skeptical, saying that the lack of lawyers prepared to take on such complex and relatively poorly paid cases was the more fundamental challenge. And we saw barrister strikes recently as well. The legal profession, when it comes to the government actually compensating lawyers, is very, very low for their work. And legal aid is one of the things that needs to go up in order for it to work. And we got on to more of the kind of important stuff. Sophie Ridge actually did some really good work on this, saying, is this abuse still going on? The person she's interviewing from the chief executive of the Survivors Trust, saying, I think so, and I 100% think it's still going on, which is tragic. And so this is an interview here with Kinnick. This one's worth listening to, I think.
Very sadly, there are people in our society who do sick and perverted things. I would love to live in a world where that didn't happen. The job of the government is to bear down on that, to do our very best to eradicate it from our society. And our view is that the practical and rapid and tangible way of taking this forward is through the J recommendations. But, of course, you always leave the door open to making any changes and improvements that might be needed further down the line.
You mentioned accountability a bit earlier in the interview and how important accountability was. Who's lost their jobs over this?
Well,
that's the big question. Who's actually going to be held accountable for these failings? Who was told about this stuff happening and never was punished for it? Because there are people in social services, people in the police, amongst other people who would have been told about what was going on, who would have seen what was going on and did nothing about it. They're the ones who should be dragged as well.
That, I think, is a really important question, both for all of those who have been involved in the cases and in the investigations. I don't think it's right for me to sit here and name names or make individual accusations or allegations. But when you've got a system that is robust, accountability is a really important part of that system.
This feels to me, I understand that people feel this has been weaponised, but the reason it has been is because people feel that there hasn't been justice, that there hasn't been change, and that there hasn't been accountability. No one's lost their jobs. Social workers turned a blind eye. Police turned a blind eye. Where's the accountability? Who's gone? It's extraordinary.
If these people are still employed by these councils and by the police force, we have a major problem.
With respect, I do think that that's a question for previous Conservative politicians who were in government for 14 years.
Also for you guys as well, because this stuff was coming out under New Labour as well at the end of the Labour tenure.
But you're now in government. You can do something now.
Yeah, that's right, and we are working at pace. We have said that we will implement the recommendations. You didn't even get that commitment from the previous Conservative administration.
That's great, but, does that mean people will be punished or not? Can you tell us, in direct terms, that people who covered things up will be punished or not? That's what the question she's asking.
So, I think we're saying, look, we're picking up on a broken system due to the neglect and incompetence of the last 14 years. We've been in power for about 6 months now. Of course, there is a lot more to do, and the government is trying to get the system up and running across so many different areas of our justice system, but also our National Health Service, the economy. There's a lot going on.
It's an absolute pathetic answer to what was being asked of him. And this is the final clip we're going to look at for this video.
Now, today we're talking about grooming gangs and the rape and abuse of girls that took place in towns across the UK. And look, I've thought quite a lot about how to open this show, because over the last week, there's been lies and disinformation. There's been politics, so much politics, mudslinging, weaponisation, the lot. But there is a reason that this was able to happen, because people rightly feel that an appalling child abuse scandal took place in this country, and there's been a lack of accountability. The recommendations of the public inquiry into the scandal haven't been implemented. Nobody's lost their job. And frankly, there can be no assurance that this couldn't happen again, or that this isn't happening still. Yes, some of the perpetrators have been locked up, but this is also a story about our institutions turning a blind eye, whether social services or the police, the people who were supposed to be looking after these vulnerable girls that could have saved them, treating them like the criminal rather than the victim. So what's changed since then? Has anything changed? We'll be asking. on tonight's show. We'll also speak to the Health Minister, Stephen Kinnock, who tells...
We've already seen that clip, and yeah, it was not great, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think just blaming the Tories for it, I think, is the wrong thing to do. I think they do hold a lot of responsibility for why institutions haven't been improved, why the prosecutions rate by like 2.6%. I think it's here, and we know the answer why. They hollowed out legal aid, they hollowed out the police, they hollowed out the courts. You know, you're talking about people who, it's taken around 4 years for victims of serious crimes to have their court case heard. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to me. But I think Elon Musk what he said is incredibly inflammatory, and he's opened up something which he either knows about and is causing problems on purpose, or he's completely ignorant of and has no idea what he's doing. And a lot of his idiots that are following him have no idea what is going on here, because this stuff has been talked about in the mainstream media for a long time now. The fact that Nigel Farage is only recently talking about this is crazy to me, given that he's meant to be England's #1 patriot, or at least in the top 5. But you know, it's not that surprising. He jumps on any bandwagon he can find that's relevant to the right wing. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. E. coli found in water supplies of properties in southeast London. Oof. That's gnarly. But anyways, we're going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.